Um, yeah, Cornelius and I were working on it a little bit last night after we got off the call. I could not get um the six to like I can take the padding off of for number one to touch the left side of the column. And if I set it to auto, it would bring the column to touch to like make the column only span to what the content is in it, but I wanted it to take up the whole page. So I didn't know if I had to like manually set the width
Yeah,
there.
so the homework assignment, just so everyone has context, the homework assignment in Canvas is to recreate this mockup. Um, excuse me. And so this is meant to be kind of you this doesn't have to be what we call a pixel perfect mockup, meaning that it doesn't need to be exactly right. So if you're working on this homework assignment and you're like, oh, I noticed the word aside is a little bit lower than the word main, you don't have to do that in your code. And then the same goes for the background column, the background color down here. So if you notice that this red goes right to the edge, but then in your version of the code, if there's a little bit of a gray area around the entire row there, that is okay. So you don't need to be pixel perfect here. We just want you to practice around with the rows, with the columns, with trying to roughly get that to work with background colors. It's more about the layout and positioning than it is the exact pixels matching. So if you get 90% of the way there and you say that mostly looks like what his looks like, then that is totally fine, and just go ahead and submit that.
Like, yeah, I have it pulled up if you wanted to just look at it real
Yeah,
quick. I
sure.
don't know.
Go for it.
Here we go. Let's make sure I'm sharing the right screen now.
Just don't share your code, only share
Yes,
what's running.
I have it away now. There we go. Okay.
Perfect. So
So
for
like that right there.
Yeah, so we would want to see a couple things here. One, make sure that you are setting a height for the main and the aside here, so it actually takes up a lot more space.
Right.
And then something's going on here. We're going to learn about containers today, but make sure that your entire site is inside of a container. And that should help with the difference of the space here and here with it not over here. So there's something going on where you've got maybe these two are inside of a div and these three are not, and that could be causing the issue.
Okay.
But after we do the weather assignment today, it will be a little bit more clear of how to work on yours.
Alrighty. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's kick off with stand up. What did we accomplish yesterday?
We were able to utilize div, class, and ID inside divs, and also be able to customize both the border padding and font size and color associated in those divs.
Exactly. So we started seeing our CSS selectors really for the first time, right? We were able to not only target the HTML elements in our CSS, we were able to add our own classes and IDs and target them. And remember, whenever we put a class on something, that lines up with a period in our CSS selector. Whenever we put an ID on something, that lines up with the pound or the hashtag in our CSS. What's the difference between the two of them? Classes are meant to be reusable. We can put that class on as many HTML elements, divs, A tags, whatever we want. But IDs are meant to be unique. So we are meant to not repeat that. IDs are meant to kind of be a one-time thing of this one ID will only be used once in the entire HTML document. What else did we do yesterday? What else stuck out?
We learned to get to put bootstrap inside of code, and also utilizing the link tag, the link element. Am I right?
Yes, you were right. So we use the link tag not only to externally link to CSS files that we create, we can also link to external files out on the internet. And that's exactly how we kind of install Bootstrap. Now, there are a couple more steps to installing Bootstrap, but for right now, just getting started with Bootstrap, that one link tag is enough. So the easiest way to see if Bootstrap is installed is Bootstrap changes the default font. And so that's a little subtle way we can see that it's installed. But if we mess something up in the install, you'll go to use your rows and your columns, and your browser will look at you and be like, I have no idea what that is. And so all of a sudden, all of your stuff is going to go down the page, and you're like, why is my grid system not working? It's because we don't have Bootstrap in that page. And so we need to put in Bootstrap every single page that we build. And as we get more advanced and get into React, we'll start learning how we can install it once and have it work across the entire project, which is really nice. But for now, we're going to get more practice with Bootstrap. We're going to practice specifically with the grid system tonight. And then as we progress on other projects, we'll start using components built into Bootstrap to do more than just layout and get some additional styling from them. Asma, go ahead.
I also learned about the 3 different ways that CSS can be applied. The first being the style tag, which contains the selector, the property, and the value. We also went over the inline CSS as well as the external style sheet.
Yeah, so lots of different places we can put CSS. That external style sheet is definitely preferred just because it makes our HTML a little less cluttered, a little bit easier to learn. But all 3 of them are definitely used. And depending on how you're writing your code, those answers can vary a little bit. So all good tips there. Anything else from yesterday that stood out?
We also learn how to utilize extensions with VS Code, mainly the live server, I think. Yeah.
Yep. Live server and live share. And those 2 aren't the same thing, but I will accidentally mix them up. The live server is so that when we make changes to our code and remember to save them, they will automatically update in the browser. And then the live share is so that you can kind of code along with me. And that live share is also something that you guys can do if you're working together on a group and you kind of want to see each other's code. You can start a live share with each other and share a link. A reminder that those live share links that I share change every day and won't work after class, but then the code will get uploaded into GitHub, which is accessible via Canvas. So right at the end of class, you may be rushing to kind of finish up on your code, and my live share will go dead. I try to always upload everything to GitHub before I end up closing out the live share, so you can switch over and review all of the code over there. Anything else from yesterday?
We also study for the box model.
The box model, yes. So the box model is used almost for every single element that we create in HTML. It isn't used for inline elements, but by default, it is used for almost everything. And that box model is how we can not only position things further away from other elements with margin, but then how we can move those elements in from the edge so that the content has some breathing room between the content itself and then the space that it's taking up. That is called padding. And so sometimes you can actually use the 2 interchangeably, but other times you can't, right? Sometimes you want both margin and padding. So the main thing to remember there is padding is what's going to give you room from the edge of the content to the box that it is taking up. And then margin is going to move that box further away from other elements. So sometimes they can accomplish the same thing, but sometimes you need both of them. So that's really the question to ask yourself is, am I trying to move this away from something else, or am I trying to give this more space around the item? And then that box model is something that we will be practicing tonight, both in terms of giving space between things, and then also for more breathing room around elements. Anything else?
Yeah, we talked briefly about Flexbox.
Yeah, so Flexbox we touched on very briefly. There is an optional homework assignment called Flexbox Froggy that will dive more into alignment. I don't think I have that until an optional assignment until next week, just so you get a little bit more comfortable with your HTML elements and all of that good stuff. But Flexbox is a really powerful way to lay things out. We won't be using Flexbox directly too much in class because Bootstrap has a lot of utility classes that use Flexbox under the hood to align things. So we'll be using more of Flexbox through Bootstrap. However, if Flexbox is certainly a very powerful tool, and if you get over kind of the initial learning curve of it, you'll be able to position things basically wherever you want on the page. So in the assignment that or the project we're doing in class tonight, you're going to see how we can achieve a complicated layout using just the grid system and Bootstrap utility classes. But as you are building up your own sites, you may lean into saying, hey, I kind of want to get under the hood. I want more customizability here. And that's when Flexbox can come really in handy. Anything else from yesterday? Okay, so a reminder, why do we do that? Why do we spend the first 15 minutes of class going over what we accomplished? Well, that's largely so that we've got an idea of what we did yesterday, because what we're doing today is just going to build on it. So this is the website that we will be building today and probably a little bit into tomorrow. So you can see this is kind of a 5-day forecast with the current weather conditions. We could look at this and say, yeah, this isn't a particularly fancy website, but I kind of can see how that would work, right? I can see the need for that. But this is going to be the first time we get into something called div soup. We kind of touched on it yesterday, but at this point, we're going to have lots of divs and divs and divs. And so we kind of want to start breaking this up and thinking about, hey, before I start writing a line of code here, visually, let's break this up into different elements. And once we're able to do that, it becomes much easier to figure out our outline in our code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to post this screenshot into Slack. And if you would like to follow along with me and practice, you totally can. If you want to just go along for the ride, that is also totally fine. So in Slack, if you kind of hover over this image, you can hit the download icon right at the top of it and save it into your downloads folder. Once it's in downloads, my downloads are in my dock. If they're not, you can go to Finder and pop open downloads. I'm going to go right down to my dock and pop open that file. And this is going to open an application called Preview. Preview is one of, I think, the most underrated tools in the Mac. People think that it's just the default like image and PDF application, but there are some really powerful tools in Preview in this markup section. So if you see up at the top here, it says show markup toolbar. It is a pen with a circle around it. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and that exposes an entire row of tools up at the top. Now I'm going to visually break down this this mockup so that I can understand how many layers of nesting do I really need before we get into our code. So what I'm going to do is up in that new toolbar that appeared, and I'm sorry that I can't make this section of my screen any bigger, I'm going for the shapes here. And at any point, if you can't find what I'm looking at, just raise your hand or come off mute and say, explain that better. So it is the fifth icon over. It is a square in front of a circle. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to go down to the rectangle tool. You can use the rounded rectangle or the regular rectangle, but when I click on that, it's going to drop in a rectangle. Now, there are a couple things that we can control in that rectangle. If we go up to the top, there are two different squares. One is a square with the border color, and if you hover over it, it will say border color. So I can click on that, and I can pick on any color that I want. So I'll make it red. And then if we go over one more square, this is the fill color. So I could set it to fill in that entire area of the rectangle. I don't want it to fill in the entire area of the rectangle. I want that rectangle to be transparent. So I'm going to go back up to that fill color, come to this square with the red diagonal line through it, click on that, and then I'm going to take this rectangle, and the mouse is really finicky here, so get it right on the edge of the rectangle and drag it to the top left corner. Terry, question.
Yeah, how are you getting the other bar from the thing, right? Like
Yeah, so this sub
this
bar
part. Yeah,
is
like that part, because I only
under
got
the marker with the circle.
I got it. Thanks.
Yep. Anyone else struggling to find that? Cool. All right, so again, clicked on my rectangle or my shapes, clicked on the rectangle. We can control the line color and the fill color. And then I'm going to take this triangle and just draw it all the way around. Why am I doing that? Because that's going to be the container div, right? Normally when we start a website, we don't want to just throw everything inside the body, because oftentimes we want to control the area around the screen, right? We may say, hey, if we're on a 28-inch monitor, I don't want the website to span the entire width. I kind of want it to grow to a certain point and then stop. And that is the notion of a container. So I draw a big box around all of that, and I go, my big outer div will be my container. Now I'm going to go a level deeper there. What do you guys think hierarchically is the next thing that we would do in this outline?
Perhaps dividing the first half from the second half.
You got it, right? So it's tempting to go right into this first area here, but hierarchically, you're completely right. We need to have two separate rows. So I'm going to create another rectangle, and I'm going to change that color to blue. The colors don't really matter here, but we're just trying to make it visually so we can understand it. So I'm going to go drag that into position and reposition this so that I can see it's around my first row. And then I can hit Command C and Command V and just duplicate that into my second row. Okay, now that we've got that done, we can dive into our third and final layer of prioritization or organization here. So I'm going to do one more rectangle. I'm going to drag that into position kind of around my cloud, and I'll make that our third and final color so that we can easily see it. Let's go for orange. Now, this is taking up one section of my row. I can take that, and now visually I can see, hey, that temperature looks like it's taking up almost the same amount of space. I can come over here and do my temperature, or I'm sorry, my details. And then we've got this weird space here, and then all of the content over here. So I'm going to take that, and even though it's tempting to just put this over here, we need something that is actually going to push this content over here. So it may not make sense now, but when we get into our code, it will. So I'm going to just drag that out to take up that remaining amount of space there. So visually, I think that makes pretty good sense. We're going to finish this little exercise up by taking that box and doing our second row and just putting them around the days of the week. The idea is that the weather of this is actually representative of central New York, because we will go from 72 degrees and raining unicorns to 98 in thunderstorms. In fact, I think it's going to be freezing today and 70 by the weekend. So yay. All right, do we have any questions on this layout? Okay, so from here, I go one step deeper into this, and I go, all right, let's go and encode it. And I'm like, before I code it, I want to make sure that I understand this hierarchy. And our brains can see hierarchy much better in outlines than it can in code, even when it's properly indented. So we're going to do one more practice step here. We're going to do a little outline. So I'm going to open up a Google Docs. And I'm going to do it in the right folder so you guys can access it. Give me 1 second to get there. So we are going to say, always name your files, week 2, day 3 weather outline. And I'm going to just position this so we can see both of them on the screen at the same time. We'll zoom out here a little bit. And we said, okay, the first major outline we saw was in red, and that was our container. So I am going to say everything is in our container. Now, what is one level deeper in our container? Those are our 2 rows in blue, right? We've got a blue row and a blue row. So I'm going to say row number 1, and we'll say that is current weather. And row number 2 is our forecast, 5-day forecast. Now we go one level deeper there, and we go, all right, what's in my row 1? We've got a col, and now we can think about, what did we learn about the grid yesterday? The grid is based off of 12 columns. So if we are trying to space things out here, it looks like this section, this orange one, is taking up about half of the screen, right? So if that's taking up half the screen, that must be a col 6. If that is a col 6, these 3 together must also add up to 6. And they roughly look like they're about the same space between them. So let's just take a guess and say this one will be 2, this one will be 2, this one will be 2, and this one will be a 6. So if we do 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 6, we add up to that 12, and we filled in the whole row. So we're going to call this a col 2 and say this is the icon. We're going to make a col 2 and say that is the temp. We'll make another col 2 and say those are the details. And then finally, the col 6 will be the location. Finally, we can do our row 2, and these will all be cols. And because all of these are equally spaced, equally sized, I don't actually have to specify a size on them, which is kind of nice. In the newer versions of Bootstrap, all I need to do is make it a col, and all of them will be evenly spaced. So I'll say col, and then I'll say times 5, because we'll have 5 of them. Or probably even better to do it like this: col, 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 col. And that is our 5-day forecast. Okay, now I'm going to share this link with you guys in the Zoom chat. One with link, can view.
I'm
So
so sorry.
if-
Do you mind putting things on Slack instead?
The only reason I
Or-
don't send them in Slack is because other people are in the channel, and so a lot of people get notifications when I post in there. So that's why I do it in the Zoom chat instead.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, so that outline is posted in there. And I will also post that screenshot in there. Does Zoom support file attachments finally? Yes, they do. Okay, so both of them are in there. Now, you and I will also post the one marked up. So if you are more of a visual person, you can go off of that, you can go off the screenshot, right? But if you are more of a outline person, you can go off of the Google Doc. I don't know why it is not. What happened to all my boxes? I just saved that file. That's really weird. All right, well, I guess we'll be going off the outline. I'm not sure why it didn't say my boxes there, but you got the idea of the exercise, right? Break things down, see the different levels of that. Now that may seem like it's completely overkill before we jump into our code, but that can really, really help us when we get so nested into our code that we don't have things laying out in the right position. Okay, so let's actually jump into our code. I'm going to go to Finder. I'm going to go to my desktop, to my code, to my week 2. I'm going to make a new folder called day 3. Obviously, I'm very creative. I am going to open up my VS Code by grabbing that day 3 and dragging it onto my VS Code icon. I'm going to make a new file called index.html. And we're going to pause there and let you guys catch up. I am also going to start my live share. So in the live share, remember, before you click on the link in Zoom, you should go File, New Window, go to the live share icon, click the Join button. The good news is that VS Code will keep you signed into GitHub, so you shouldn't have to go through that process again. Then you are going to head to the Zoom chat. Don't click on the link, right-click, copy the link, come back to VS Code, paste that in, hit enter, and you should be able to see my code, which is just an empty index file at the moment. Lots of steps there. Let me recap. In Finder, week 2, create your new day 3 folder, drag that empty day 3 folder into VS Code. Once it's in VS Code, create a new file called index.html. Then go File, New Window in VS Code. Go to Live Share, click on Join, go to the Zoom chat, copy the link, go back to VS Code and paste the link. And if anyone missed a step there, let me know. I'm happy to repeat. Lots of little steps. This is only the 3rd day that we're doing this. It's going to feel like clockwork in the next week or so.
I try to click on live share and it's showing up make read only, more info, or copy again.
So in your live share, you may need to, do you have like a do not enter sign in the top right?
How would I check that? I'm open up a new window. Oh wait, yeah. Let me. Oh,
Do you want to share your screen?
all right. I'm clicking join, and you put the link in the
Zoom.
chat.
Yep.
Okay. All right, got it. I did not mean to open it. My bad.
All good.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Just like most of you are in, I'll give you another minute to join the live share. Make sure that you've got your code window open with index.html created.
How will I save like the screenshot that we did with the
In preview?
other in preview.
Yeah, if you hit Command S, it should just save it into the okay. It should just save it into the screenshot that you downloaded in your downloads folder. Just be warned that preview does not allow you to edit that. Once you close it and reopen it, those rectangles will not be movable.
I see. So is there like no way to like to save it as like a different file?
Unfortunately, not in preview. We're kind of limited to preview there. It's not like a Photoshop file where you can save it like as a PSD or something like that. So unfortunately, not in that. We'll do that exercise for the next project or two, just so that we've got a layout of our divs. It's not something that I do as a professional developer, because you kind of get good at being able to visualize that, but it is a really helpful tool to have some kind of visual, make it an outline before you get into your code.
Thanks, Max.
Yeah, I wish there was an editable format. That would be a great feature of preview. And you can do things like, we use Canva to do all of our designs at Hack Upstate. You can accomplish the same thing in there. You could also accomplish that in Figma. So you could upload a screenshot into Figma and then start drawing boxes around it in there, and then it would remain editable. So maybe Figma is a better tool for that.
Yeah, I also keep forgetting that this is not a Windows computer, so I gotta, because I'm so used to putting like the rectangles on like a picture, and I'd be like, okay, I don't want to save it on the original picture. I want to save it as like a different picture. So that's the reason why I.
Yep. Yeah, you should be able to go file duplicate, and then you'll be able to save that wherever you want. The other trick in preview is if you are in the file menu, and you're looking for save as instead of save, if you hold the option key, it will convert duplicate into save as, and then you get that same functionality that you're looking for. I don't know why they did that. They changed that like years ago, and now if you hold an option, you get that save as instead, and that can be really helpful. Okay, let's go ahead and dive in. I've got my index.html set up, and we have seen now 3 days in a row, we've got our HTML element, we've got our body, and we've got our head, right? Well, that's kind of tedious to type out over and over again. So today I'm going to show you a little bit of Emmet, and you guys can decide how much of Emmet you love and how much of Emmet you hate. The most commonly used version of Emmet will start putting in your entire HTML template for you. So I'm going to hit Shift-1 for my exclamation point and enter. And boom, all of this code shows up. And I'm like, whoa, 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 what's all of this? But again, that's just typing an exclamation point and hitting enter, and that will do the autocomplete. I've kind of been lying to you. I've been telling you that HTML head and body are the only required tags, and that was true about 10 years ago. But HTML has gotten a lot better since then, and we need a couple more things so that the browser knows that the HTML version we're working with is the absolute latest and greatest of HTML. So this top one up here is doc type HTML. That's just an additional thing that we add so that when the browser is parsing it, it knows that this entire document is HTML. We also add in a lang equals en. This is actually so Google Translate and other translators can go through your website and know what the original source content was written in. This works with a standard called I18N, which is kind of a standard for internationalization of your content, not only the words on the website, but things like date formats, currencies, even times, all show up the right way. So the adding that lang en just helps translators. Terry, you have a question?
Yeah. What do you say to do again? You said put the exclamation mark and then space?
And then the enter key. It will only work if your file ends in .html.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in index.html. So okay, I got it. Thanks.
Cool.
You can also do exclamation tab, and they'll do it too as well.
Yes. Okay, so we have our head tag. No changes there. We've seen our head tag before. Now we have two new things in here. We've got this meta char set UTF equals 8. Back in the day, the main character encoding that we used was called ASCII, ASCII. And that allowed for basically a couple hundred characters that we have on our keyboard, uppercase, lowercase, a basic set of symbols, numbers, and that's pretty much it. However, as the world grew, we found that there are a lot more characters than the characters just on the standard English or US keyboard that we are used to, right? Different languages use like tildes over characters. And then we got into this whole other world of, well, what happens when we get into non-traditional characters, right? Chinese symbols, Japanese symbols, emoji, right? All of a sudden, the computer didn't have enough room to store and encode all of these different characters into zeros and ones. And so UTF-8 is a newer, it's called Unicode encoding that basically says under the hood, hey, there may be some characters in this web page that aren't just your basic ASCII characters, like emoji. So by putting UTF in here, we're telling the browser, hey, we are supporting the latest or one of the latest Unicode standards. And because of that, we're allowed to use things like emoji in our page. Next line down, we have this thing called meta name viewport. This is all about responsiveness. This is saying, hey, the width of the page when it first loads should be the width of the device. So if you remember back to kind of our original smartphones, sometimes you would load in a page and it would load in like the top corner of the page. And you'd have to pinch out to see the whole page in order to get to where you wanted to go. That's what this solves. This tells any modern browser, hey, when the page first loads, make the width of the page the same as the width of the device screen. And also scale things out to 1.0. Make it so that zoomed in is 100%. So if you wanted to, you can actually adjust that scale number there. We don't do that a lot, but this meta viewport is actually really important for Bootstrap so it knows how big to make that container. So this meta viewport is basically saying turn on responsiveness the way that we know all good websites to work on our mobile phones. Finally, we have our title. Nothing changed about the title. That's still going to be the tab title. And then we've got our body element and our closing HTML. So even though that this looks like it's adding more than we need, what it has added is actually all really good hygiene, really good practice for our HTML, because it's helping the browser understand that we're writing some pretty modern HTML code here. Sorry, I just realized there were a couple things in the chat that I may have missed. I thought I had enabled chat history to run the length of the meeting. That is something that I thought Zoom had fixed. Apparently they have not. So I will check the Zoom settings during break and make sure that the chat history is accessible. Okay, any questions about the new stuff that is showing up? We're going to do one final thing before we dive into our code. I have noticed that I have not saved this file, and that is driving me nuts. And every time that I go back to my browser, I need to hit the save key. So we are going to turn on autosave. So I'm going to go to code up at the top, down to settings, and down to settings again. Or the keyboard shortcut is Command, comma. That will also pop up your settings. If you have autosave here, great. If you don't, you can do a search for autosave and it will be the first thing that comes up. And I'm going to change my off dropdown here to on focus change. That means that when my cursor disappears from my VS Code window, I want it to automatically save that file. If this is something that bothers you or that you don't want on, by all means, leave it off and continue hitting Command S manually. But I like making mine on focus change. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to select that. I can close out of my settings. And the last thing I need to do is go into my body. I'm going to make an H1 that says hello. I'm going to go down to my go live and wait for that to pop up. And I've got my hello showing up in my browser. Everyone good?
So what's the difference when you put Windows change instead of like focus change? Like, is there like any difference or?
Yeah, good question. So focus change is whenever your cursor disappears from the file. So if I open up another file and I have it set to on focus change, it will save that file before it opens up the new file. If I do it on window change, it will only save the file if I click outside of VS Code and go into the browser. Okay. Now that I've got my document all set up, I want to do two final setup steps. I want to get my bootstrap in, and I want to get an external style sheet linked. So let's do the style sheet, or let's do bootstrap first. So I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com. If you prefer to go to yesterday's code and copy it from there, that's totally fine. I'm going to do it from the bootstrap website. So I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com. I'm going to click on docs up at the top. I'm going to scroll down to number 2. I'm going to find this link tag and triple click on it, which will highlight the whole line. I'm going to Command C, head back over to my VS Code, come down beneath my title, and go ahead and paste that link in. I'll also update my title tag before I forget about it and call that weather. I will save. Once I have my bootstrap link, I'm going to leave this tab open because we may need it for documentation. But I'm going to go back to my Go Live tab and I will notice my hello font has changed. Again, getbootstrap.com, click on docs, scroll down to number 2, triple click on the link tag, copy, head back to my code, go to the link, go to beneath the title, paste that link in. If it's all on one line, that's okay. You don't need to worry about mine being across multiples. All right. I'm also going to set up my external CSS.
Max, can you rewalk that one more time?
Sure. Getbootstrap.com is the website. Click on docs or read the docs. Either one takes you to the same spot. Scroll down here to number 2 under quick start. This link tag here is what we're looking for. Triple click on that. Command C to copy it. Head back over to VS Code. Put my cursor after title, hit enter. Command V to paste it. And then when I go back to my weather tab, the font should have changed.
Yes, sir. Okay. Yeah, I couldn't get it to.
Okay, finally, set up. I need to get my external style sheet working. So I'm going to make a new file called style.css. I'm going to target my H1, and I'm going to make the color of that H1 red. I go to my browser, that's not applying. Why isn't that applying? Because my CSS, my HTML needs to be told that my CSS exists. In order to do that, it needs to go beneath the link tag of my to my bootstrap, and I'm going to add in another link tag. The rel will be a style sheet. The rel is relation. Basically, what relation does this link have? And then the href of that is going to be my style.css. I will save that. I'll come back over to the browser and I will have a red hello. Why do I bother doing that? Hello isn't in my weather app. That's not going to be there in the long term. I don't want to just create a style sheet and assume that I did the linking right. If I didn't have an H1 in here, there would be nothing for me to style. And if I didn't put in this color red, there would be no way to know that my CSS is linked in properly to my index.html. So that isn't something that, you have to do on every page, but I like testing it so that we have something that we can see every step that we do. because otherwise you could do all of these steps, realize that your Bootstrap link is broken. That could be breaking your external style sheet. That external style sheet may not be applying to your content. And now you've got to go through and debug each one of those to figure out which one it is. So by going step by step here and making sure those changes are getting made in the browser, we now know that we've set everything up and that everything is working, so that when we do start writing our code, we don't have to second guess ourselves on the setup steps. We're able to say, hey, we know everything is working because my each one is showing up and it's in red and it's in the Bootstrap font, so I am good to go.
So just think of it as like a placeholder to see if everything is working correctly.
You got it. We are going to pause here and go do attendance. The secret word tonight is Emmet. E-M-M-E-T. It may have two T's. E-M-M-E-T. One T. E-M-M-E-T. Emmet is what VS Code uses under the hood and a lot of other text editors to do auto completions using shortcuts. And so go ahead, head over to attendance in Canvas, fill out the form. The secret word tonight is Emmet, E-M-M-E-T.
Wait, you said E-M what now?
E-M-M-E-T. Okay, now we get to rock and roll. I'm going to take my H1 out because we don't need that. I was just making sure that my style sheets are linked. I'm going to go to my style.css and delete that out. I don't need that either. I'm then going to go back to my index.html and I'm going to look at my outline. And my outline says everything starts in a container. Okay, well, what do we mean by container? I'm going to go over to the Bootstrap documentation. I'm going to expand it out so I get the sidebar. I'm going to go down to layout, and under layout, there are containers. And what do we see here? It says, hey, Bootstrap comes with 3 different containers. It comes with a basic container, and it comes with a container breakpoint, and then a container fluid. We're going to play around with container fluid in our next project. That will be a full width container. What we are going to start with is the default container, and it gives us the code right there. Now, it may be tempting to copy and paste that, but getting the muscle memory of having VS Code auto drop in all of those symbols is a really good thing to practice. So I'm going to go back over to my VS Code. I'm going to collapse my file explorer so that we've got more room on the screen. Inside my body, I'm going to hit enter. That's going to do my indentation the right way for me. I'm going to do a div.
Excuse me, Max.
Yeah.
I just got disconnected. My internet had gave out for a couple minutes.
Yep.
So I got to reconnect back to your live section on Visual Code Studio.
Just pasted the link into chat.
Yeah, sir. Thank you.
I'm going to see if there's a way I can set that up tomorrow so that link doesn't change every day. Let's see if that works. Okay. In my code, I'm going to make a div. I'm going to say class equals container. Now, inside my container, I've got a row and a row. So I'm going to say, enter in here, I'm going to make my first div class equals row. Now we've got div soup going on. We've got 2 layers of divs, and I'm like, might get confused here. So what I'm able to do is I'm going to put my cursor inside here, and I'm going to hit Command/. Command/ is going to put in this funky looking syntax for me. This is called an HTML comment. almost every programming language has their own comment syntax, and almost every one is different. What a comment basically says is, hey, computer, ignore this. Well, why would we want the computer to ignore this? We tell the computer to ignore this so it's easier for us to be able to visually to be able to communicate to other programmers or to communicate to ourselves, hey, this is some note that I want to leave that the computer doesn't need to worry about. So I'm going to add a note in here that says end of row. Number 1. Then I'm going to come down here and add another comment that says end of container. Right? And now I know this comment is really applying to the row right underneath it. And this comment is applying to this closing div right underneath it. Now I can say, where do I want my next row to be? I want my next row to be not inside the first row, but I do want it to be inside my container. So I'm going to go to my closing div of my row and add a new div class row. And I will add another comment that says end of row number 2. So I save. I'm so excited to see my pretty container and all of my pretty rows, and I get a white page. Like, but where are all of my pretty rows? Well, there's no content inside of that, right? We can lay things out all we want, but until we put some content in there, we can't see anything. So I'm going to keep plowing through and I'm going to go, all right, I want to get my icon showing up. So I go, where's my icon going to go? It's in my first row. It's in the container. So I need that col2 in there first. So I'm going to say div class col2, and all I'm going to do is put the word icon in there. I personally like doing placeholders for everything and getting my layout perfected, because once my layout is perfected, adding in the content becomes much, much easier. So I'm going to save that. I go back over here and I get my icon. I'm coming up on a breakpoint that will let you guys catch up. I'm going to finish out my first row. So I'm going to say div class equals col2. And I will say temp. And I'm going to add in my details and finally my location. I will save that. And what we should have is the icon, temp, details, and location looking like this. See a lot of heads moving back and forth. We're going to take a break and we're going to let you catch up here. If you are able to get it all caught up and working, after you vote in the poll, go back through, read through the code, make sure you understand why I've put it in that order.
Sorry, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Okay, in choosing the number that follows the call,
Mhm.
call dash, etc.,
Mhm.
is the number representative of the amount of essential blocks that it will be spanning, or the positioning of it? I think that's what I'm kind of confused on.
That's the width of the container, the width of the column.
So
the
essentially, how many of those 12 partitions it would, okay, so the span,
Yes.
essentially,
Yes.
if I can put it, okay,
Yes. Yep.
perfect. I
Yep.
didn't know if it was the positioning or the span. That makes perfect sense. Okay, thank you.
We'll do an exercise on the next project that overlays the 12 columns basically in our visual mockup in preview. And that will allow us to kind of measure out how wide one of those columns should be. So I kind of just did it by eye. But when we're designing, oftentimes we'll actually use that grid to go, oh, you know what, this column is a little too wide, or this one isn't easily divisible by 12, so let's adjust from there. So that will be an exercise that we do. But yes, the number is the percent of blocks it will take out of 12.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, looks like almost all of you have been voted in here. Any questions about this? Okay, let's keep powering through. I'm going to go back to my outline, and now we can kind of see the 1, 2, 3 steps here, right? 1, do it visually. 2, have the outline done, and then 3, get our HTML to line up with the outline. We don't have any of the content in yet. We haven't gotten to any of the pretty styling yet. That's okay, right? What we're doing now is mastering the notion of nesting divs and making sure that we aren't accidentally putting divs in divs that we don't mean to put them in. So down in my row 2, I'm going to create my div class. And this time, because I want all of the columns to be equal, I'm not going to specify a number. I'm going to say, hey, automatically just assign them evenly. And then I'll say day number 1 and paste that and say 2, 3, 4, and 5. And when I look at my weather app, I now have them laying out kind of where I want them to go.
I got mine's set up a bit differently. How you put day 1, I put just like D1 just to how to have like a better understanding.
That's fine it's just a placeholder for now. As long as you can see it, going across the screen, that's all that matters. Okay. So we've got everything set up there, and I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the mock-up that we started with, and I'm like, this looks absolutely nothing like this. Well, let's start diving into that. So the first thing that I notice is there's this big, beautiful icon there. Well, that icon, we can use the same trick that we used in Figma, right? Because all of these icons are in the emoji database. So that's what we're going to start with. We're going to highlight the word icon, delete that out, hit Control Command Space, and that is going to pop open my emoji picker. And I have my cloud and my frequently used, but if you type in cloud, you can get all of those different cloud options for you. I'm going to go ahead and click on one, save it, come back over here, and now I've got a teeny tiny little cloud. Now, interestingly enough,
Hard to see.
what's that?
Oh, I said when you add an emoji in there, it's pretty hard to see. Is there any way that we could like size it up some?
Not in our code, but we are going to size it up in we can't visually size it up in the VS Code text editor, but what we can do is blow it up in our design so it shows up much bigger. So in order to do that, we are going to add a new CSS class. And because this styling is only going to apply to this one specific section of our site, we shouldn't use a class because this isn't going to get reused anywhere else. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to add an ID. and we'll call that ID weather icon. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Then I am going to head over to my style.css, and I'm going to split this down so it's on the bottom half of my screen. So that way I can reference the ID that I just added and also have my style.css open. So I'm going to do a pound sign because it's an ID, and I'm going to say weather icon. And then because emojis are technically just text, we're going to use the font size, and let's make it 48 pixels. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And just like that, you got a big old cloud. If your cloud did not grow like the Grinch's heart, now it's time to ask a question.
So I'm still stuck on getting my the palette show up for the particular characters, and Command Shift Space doesn't seem to be working for me.
VS Code is a fickle little pain in the butt sometimes. Quit VS Code and reopen it.
Okay, thank you.
Or you know what, before you quit it, try just closing that one window, because if you quit it, it will close out of the live share as well. So try and close the window and then go file new window and see if that gets it to work. If not, quit all of VS Code. There's always one student that can't get it open and they're like, I swear it's not working for me. It is not you. VS Code has a glitch in it sometimes for emojis.
Mine is not working.
Okay. So close the window and then go file new window, then file open folder, or from the recents, open the day 3 folder. And then try and place it again.
So I just close it, X.
Yep.
All right.
And then file new window to reopen it.
Okay.
And then day 3 should show up in your recents list.
Okay.
And then try and go to that spot in between the divs and control command space.
All right. Kind of stuck. I got it.
Okay.
My font size isn't expanding. I didn't try to put in so many different numbers to make it expand too.
Okay. So lots of different things that can go wrong there. So go ahead and share your screen. Let's take a look together.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm gonna request remote. So the first thing I want to check is start from the top and work our way down. So we've got our link rel style sheet in here, and we've got the href the style.css. Everything looks fine there. Now I'm going to come down and I'm going to look at our ID weather icon. So because it's ID here, I check we've got the pound sign that lines up. Our property font size is correct and the value 78 is correct. So that leaves one and only one thing left other than the curly braces, which you also have right. What do you notice between the style.css and line 18?
Oh, it's not CSS and line 18.
This right here,
Go back.
this has to match this.
Oh, I spelled it wrong.
You're missing that I, capital
Yes,
I.
sir. Yep. All right. Let me go for that. Make it a big old I.
Yep. And see if that fixes it.
All right. Let me move my cursor. It's on autosave. It did. It moved
Beautiful.
up. Yes, sir.
Anyone else need a moment or does not have a big old cloud now?
All right. Let me make this cloud even bigger.
Sorry, I just have a question, I guess. um, around user friendliness. Because an emoji is technically text, how would you write an alternative text in case the web doesn't support it?
Great question. Emoji actually have alternative text built into it. So I don't know if you've ever been in your car and had like a text message read aloud to you. It will actually say like face with sticking out tongue. And so every emoji has a name. And so text readers don't need an alt tag for emojis because they're most of the better ones are now built in to actually read those aloud. So for accessibility, we don't actually need them on them. But for image tags, alt tags, we will definitely be learning about and the importance of them.
Thank you. Makes sense.
Yeah, really good question.
Yeah, I was gonna add to that with the alternative. I'm pretty sure there was a way to add like an alternative to like images as well, but like you said, we ain't gonna learn about that until like later on.
Yep. Next project, we'll dive into images and start adding our alt tags.
Also, is there like an easier way to get the index HTML and the style CSS? Because when I try to put the style CSS at like the bottom, it kept going to like to the side instead of like the bottom. Is there
It's
like
all in feeling out where that gray rectangle is. So when I have mine open, if I grab it and I'm like hovering over on the right side here, you see it does that. So keep on holding it and try and position it down to the bottom instead. And then when you let go of it, it will open in the bottom half. So there are a ton of different options of where you can open it. And so just, getting the mouse in the right spot before you let go of it is what will make it easier to open down there.
Just a quick comment. Alternatively, on the top right of VS Code, there's different variations like portion divisions right there. Yeah, that might be easier for folks.
Yeah, this will
Or is it not?
this I'm pretty sure opened up the last time I tried it, it opened up the terminal down in the bottom. And so what you probably want to use is this icon instead. And if you hover over it, it will by default split it to the right. But if you hover over it, it will show you the keyboard shortcut is Option. So if you hold an Option and then click on it, it will split the editor down to the bottom. So it's not these up here. These are the tool windows. But if you have this icon up here, that's how you can get it to split where you want it to go. And then if you hover over it, it will show you the keyboard shortcuts to make it positioned somewhere else. Everyone good? Anyone have questions? Okay, so the next part of our design is the temperature. And so this is kind of interesting because we've got two different font sizes that we're working with. But before we add anything there, I've got to figure out the content. So I'm going, all right, where do I want my temperature to show up? Oh, I put a placeholder in for me. So that's going to make life nice and easy. So I'm going to say 48. And then I'm going to say enter. And I'm going to put in my degree sign. Or if I just type in Fahrenheit, if I type in degree, apparently not Fahrenheit. If I type in degree, it gives me my little F. So I'm going to click on that. And then I want there to be that vertical bar in there. That vertical bar is something that you may have never typed before. It is Shift and the key underneath Delete. That is a horizontal bar. Nope, sorry, that is a vertical bar. And vertical bar is how we type OR in JavaScript, which we'll get to eventually. So I'm going to do a little space. I'm going to command space again, type in degree, get my Celsius, go ahead and save that in. And now I've got it all on one line. I'm like, well, what happened there? I wanted 48 to be above it. In order to fix that, what I can do is put my temperature in its own div. So I'm going to space it out so I've got things on different lines. I'm going to put this in a div and move my 48 inside of it. So when I save, I now have my 48 and my F and my C. So we're nesting divs here. I'm still in my col 2. If I mess up anything in my col 2 or accidentally delete this closing div, all of a sudden let's see what happens. If I take this out, all of a sudden my details and location are in the wrong spot. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. So we want to make sure that when we have our closing div here, we go, hey, this is all for the temperature div. So it may be helpful to add a little note in here that says n of current temp div.
How do you do the Fahrenheit and Celsius again?
It's an emoji, so command space, control command space, and then the magic word to search for is degree, and the Celsius and Fahrenheit will show up.
Mine's is not working.
The control command space?
No, it's not that. When I open up the emoji box, when I'm trying to put the emoji in there inside VS Code, it's not showing up.
Is your cursor in the right spot before you hit control command space?
Yes.
Share your screen, let's take a look.
Can you see my screen? Okay. Yeah, I try to. It's not.
So sometimes you have to, let me request remote. Sometimes it helps if you put the cursor in another file and then put it back where you want it and then control command space. So try it now, control command space.
Okay.
And see how it's like anchored where your cursor is? That's a good sign that it's going to work. So go ahead and try it.
Ah, that worked.
Yeah, it's a little finicky. So putting your cursor in another spot and then putting it where you want it, that sometimes helps too.
Okay. Appreciate it.
So again, this is the design that we are going for. 48 on the top and the F and the C down at the bottom. So we don't have it sized right, but we've got our F and our C now showing up. Yeah, Michael.
Oh, I just got my fluffy cloud has not changed size yet. So I'm wondering what I'm
Share your screen, let's take a look.
sure.
Okay, we have our style sheet in place. We've got our weather icon. Got
Oh, I see. No, I see it.
oh, beat me to it.
Yep. Thank you.
No problem.
That's much better. Okay.
Good work.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
My let me see.
Yep, you're good.
Div for my my temp has not changed on my actual live view.
Okay. Share your screen.
Yes, sir. Let me bring this over here so you can see it.
Interesting. So one thing I noticed is that you are no longer live down at the bottom. See where it says go live? That's probably because you closed it and reopened it to get your emojis working again. So if you hit go live now, it will reopen it and show you your updates.
Gotcha. Yes, sir.
Now, before I leave you, something's funky. Go ahead and give me remote. So what should be happening is the details and location should be going across the screen, and they're going now down the screen. So we've got something going on there. our row is in the right spot, our container is in the right spot. We open this col2 and then we close it. But then where should the temperature be? The temperature should be in its own col2. So because this isn't in its own column, we now have problems. So what we should have here is another div class col2. And inside that col2 should be all of our temperatures. And so when we save that, everything goes back to normal.
Wow. Yes, sir.
So that's a really common mistake, right? We start throwing this div in here, we're adding our temperature. What you may not have realized is you had this col2 highlighted and you typed over it, or something like that happened. So as you're going, go, oh, hold on, that stuff came down here. Why is it down here? I got to fix that now, because it's almost always easier to fix it the sooner we catch it than say, oh, I'm just going to power through, I'll get everything else done, and then I'll go back and fix it. That is almost never the right answer. And that's
Yes,
that's
sir.
good for everyone to hear. So as you're going, if you see something is wrong, don't keep writing code. Go, all right, I got to fix that, and then keep on going.
Yes, sir, for sure.
Everyone in a good spot? Anyone have issues with their layout so far? Only gets more complicated and more lines of code from here. So we want to practice. There's absolutely no shame in it not working right now. We have to train our eyes to read that indentation. We have to get practice with all of these different divs, because it's not natural as a human to think in this layout manner, right? And so it's easy to see it in the outline that we did in Google Docs, harder to see it in our code when we've got all these opening and closing divs. And just that one closing div, literally one of them missing, will cause our entire outline to break.
I have a quick question regarding the degrees, I suppose. So how exactly would we access those or format those in a CSS if they're not enclosed in anything?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Or are they?
We're gonna target that right now.
I don't
So
know. Okay.
it is just text. And we would target them the same way that we are gonna target this div. So my 48 is really tiny here, and I would like it to be bigger and bolder, right? And so I could throw these in a, actually, we are going to throw them in a span tag, but let's do the temperature first. So in my 48, because again, the current temperature is that one specific thing I want to target, I'm not going to put a class on that because I don't need to reuse it. What I do need to do is put an ID on there of current temp. And then I can come down to my CSS, target my current temp in my selector, and apply styles to that. So I can say, hey, I would like my current temp to be a font size of, let's say, 36 pixels, and I would like my font weight to be bold. So I save, and I get a nice big 48. And we'll go one step further here. I have in my design, the F is a little bit more bold, right? And that's to kind of show you that I've got 48 selected, and then you could select centigrade to convert it. We're not going to make any of this interactive yet. Give it another 5 weeks, and we will be making this interactive and adding in some APIs and making it all work from there. But for now, let's target that degrees Fahrenheit, right? I want to make that bold. The problem is it's just hanging out here, right? It's all in my col2. And if I put this in a div, don't follow me on this, but if I put it in a div, I'm going to run into a problem where now my Fahrenheit, my why do I keep on saying Fahrenheit? My centigrade is pushed down, right? And I'm like, well, I don't want that. I still want to put it in something, but I don't want my divs to be a full width block and push it all down. Well, I could get hacky and I could tell my div to display as inline. And inline is going to say, treat this div as if it were just another piece of text. However, we don't really want to do that. What a better solution is here is instead of a div, I am instead going to use a span. And a span works just like a div that I can put IDs and classes on it, but it defaults as a inline element, an inline display element. So now I can come in here and say, let's do a class for practice, because I may want to have a bold class that I can apply bold text to different parts of my website. So I'll say class equals bold. I'll come down here. I will throw a bold class in, and I will say my font weight will be bold. I save that, and I get my degrees Fahrenheit now showing up in a little heavier of a font. If you've got your bold temperature showing up, you are free to go on break, be back at 7:25. If your website does not look exactly like this right now, you need some help. So raise your hand, we can screen share through it. Otherwise, go on break, be back at 7:25.
Wait, we were supposed to add the span class bold, right? To Fahrenheit?
Yep. Sorry, I said don't follow me. I didn't say now you can resume following me. My bad.
Hey Max, I got a question.
Shoot.
What would be the difference if we used a break instead of a div for the number 48?
Absolutely nothing, other than the fact that you can't put a class on a break. So you could have done a span around the 48 and then done a break after the span, and that would have worked exactly the same.
Okay.
So again, for span, mine's is working. I just want more clarification on span. So it's not really useful unless we apply like a class to it, per se, or
No, you can technically use a span without a class, because you can select all spans on the page without having classes applied to them, but the vast majority of the time you will use a class or an ID with a span.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I guess in the nav bar you could do like spans and then space them out without applying a class to them, and then say put 20 pixels of space between each one of my spans. So yeah, there are definitely times that you'll use them without a class or an ID, but for the most part, you will add one on. Yeah.
Actually, I have a problem here though.
Mhm.
I have no
Wanna share
idea.
your screen?
Sure. Should be this one. Sure. You see the here kind of.
Yep. So good eye catching that. That means we've got an opening or a closing div problem. So go ahead and show me your code.
That same problem. That was pretty.
All right, so let me request remote. Oh, go ahead and do that. Open system settings. Yep. Perfect, thank you. Okay, so in here, we've got our opening div and our closing div. We've got closing div for the row. We've got everything in a container. Got bootstrap in properly. I do not see the problem. Oh, right here. We've got a div WV.
Thank you.
So if we fix that there, see if that fixes the problem.
Yep.
No? All right. I thought that was it. Let me go back to here. Current temp span, close the span. Really thought that was it. Let me save and stop and restart. Sometimes it gets out of sync. No? Okay. Ah, here we go.
Oh, hi, Bo. Thank you.
They will get you. You're back in business.
Thank you.
No problem. Someone else have a problem?
I
I'm
have
gonna
the
make a similar, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I have the same issue. I just can't figure out what I'm doing wrong on those two. The details and the locations are like underneath the second one.
Go ahead, share your screen, and I'll come to you next, Michael.
Okay.
Asma, go ahead and share your screen. Take a look at you first. Okay. We ended up with your closing div for your second column has gone missing. So if I click on this div here, you see how it's closing all the way down at the row? What it's basically saying is before we start these other columns, we want to make sure that our current temp div is closed out. So now these should actually be over one. They should be lining up with this column. And if I save that, that should fix the problem in your browser. You're on mute, but I'm assuming you're good to go. Okay. Michael, go ahead, share the screen. Okay, our closing divs are in the right spot. I don't see any issues there. Class call. I don't see any issues there. Let me see your browser. Everything's in the right spot.
Well, why is my Fahrenheit not bold?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were you had a layout issue. ID, current temp, and current temp. Because you are missing.
Oh. Right, didn't make a class. Okay.
Yeah, you would think bold is one that's built into Bootstrap. It isn't. We just made it ourselves.
Yo, what's good, Brody? Ain't shit.
All right. Go on break. I'll see you at 7:25. Back off. So we left off with our temp looking right. And so we can keep on going here. Does anyone have any questions or need any help before we dive back in? Okie doke. So I am going to head back to my design. And now I've got three things here: precipitation, humidity, and wind. So we need to get all three of those working. Someone asked a good question right before the break of why did we use a div here instead of a BR? Well, because I know I needed to be able to style this number here, right? I can't really apply a class or an ID to a BR or a line break. But in this situation, I don't really have any styling going on other than maybe some font sizes that we need to tweak. So this is a good example of using a BR. So I'm going to go into the details here and I'm going to just type that out. I'm going to say precipitation There's no way I'm going to spell that right, and VS Code does not have a good spell check. Oh my god, did I spell it right the first time? I can't believe I did. Okay. Precipitation, however you pronounce it. That I have in the mockup as kind of a chance, so we'll say 88%. And then if I put a line break here and just say humidity, 86%, and save, you see how my thing threw it up on that same line? And I'm like, no, I don't want you up there. I want you to go down to the next line. That's when we need to use our line break. So I'm going to say BR, and that will put in the line break that will separate everything out for me. And I'll do one more of them, a line break here, and say my wind is 10 mph. And when I save that, I will now have everything showing up in 3 separate lines. So all in my call 2, precipitation, a line break, humidity, another line break, and then finally my wind speed. So I come over here and all 3 of them show up. Now, I also have a problem that if I shrink this down, everything gets crunched in together. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't love that. I could make this column a little bit wider, but if I make this a col 3, look at what happens to my location. It jumps down to the next line. And I'm like, all right, well, you know what? I'm going to put that back to a col 2. All 3 of these are kind of less important things. So visually, size really matters, right? So I'm going to go over to my col 2, and I'm going to add an ID to that called details. And then in my CSS, I'm going to target my details, and maybe I will make them a font size of, let's try 12 pixels. So I save that, I come over here, that shrinks everything down. My precipitation's still wrapping a little bit, but for the most part, I think I'm pretty happy with how that's displaying, so I will leave that as is. So again, we added an ID of details. We added in our 3 pieces of information that we wanted to show up there. We added our BR tags to make sure our line breaks were wrapping on the next line. And then finally, I came in and added my CSS details ID and made that font size of 12. Once you get all of that in, we will finish out our first section of the first row. I'm going to go look at my design again, and I've got the location showing up. I also have the time and then the current conditions to match whatever this icon is. So we can go into our location, and I'm going to throw in my location. I am going to use a line break and also put in the current time, which is Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. And I'll throw one more line break in and say that it is cloudy. I save, and I've got 2 problems. One, this isn't in bold, right? And we can see that in my design. But we already made a class name called bold. And because it's a class, I can go ahead and reuse that. So what I can do, because I want it to display inline, I could actually use a div or a span here, because the thing following it is a line break. So a div is going to make it take up the full width, but I have the line break anyway, so I might as well use a span. Either one would work here. That's totally fine. We just want to think about inline versus not inline. So I add a span in here. I'll add my class of bold onto it. And now I've got my location showing in bold. Give you a minute to catch up on that, and then we will do the final thing of text-right. So always very important to make sure that you're in that right div and you can visually see that you're in that div because of the indentation. You can see I'm indented in. That is all representing that I'm working inside of this col-6. This is what it should look like in your browser. Like maybe a little smaller. I am a little zoomed in here, so that's what it should probably look like on yours. As soon as I stop seeing the heads moving between monitors, I will continue. Give you guys a minute to catch up here.
You said what's the website supposed to look like again?
The what?
The browser.
Oh, like this. So it should be the first row entirely complete except for this not being aligned in the right spot.
I had to make sure because the way I got like my screen, so I got the Zoom screen like right here, but like the browser is like right over here too. So it's kind of
There's a lot to juggle. All right, anyone have questions or need another minute? Okie doke. All right, so let's finish this off. I want to push this text over to the right side, right? I want to right align this. There are two ways of doing it. Don't follow me on this first one. The first one, though, that we could do, again, don't follow me, we could add something here. So we could say like text align right. And then we could come down to our classes and make something called text align right that just set text align to right. And if I save that, it throws it over on the right side and everything's fine. However, there are certain things that Bootstrap is like, you know what? You probably are going to use this all the time. So if you remember what it's called in Bootstrap, you don't have to write any CSS. So I'm going to actually take this out and take my text align right out. And I'm going to head over to the Bootstrap website and I'm going to go down to utilities. And under utilities, nope, not under utilities. Under, let's try content and typography, there are all kinds of things for headings, and p tags and displays, and inline text elements, yada, yada, yada. And then under alignment, there is something that says class text center. I'm like, okay, well, that's helpful. I can understand how center is working. There is one also called text end. Now, why is it not called text right? Doesn't that make more sense? Well, that's what it was called in previous versions of Bootstrap, but now Bootstrap is using Flexbox under the hood. And Flexbox doesn't think about things about left, center, and right. It thinks about things is it at the start, the center, or the end of whatever we're working with. So even though you would think it would be text right, it's actually text end. And you can see that preview of the styling is doing exactly what we want. So now, because we have Bootstrap installed, we can just throw something on here that says text-end. Make sure you have a space between your column 6 and your text end. Those are two separate classes. We can always apply multiple classes to one div if we want, as long as we separate it by a space. So I throw that in there, and now I've got my thing, my content showing up at the end. Okay, all that's looking pretty good. We're making good progress, but there are a couple things here where I'm like, you know, this design just looks a lot better, right? Why does it look better? Well, if I open up that original design, I'm looking at this and I'm like, what about this design kind of makes it visually more appealing? And the two things that jump out at me are one, this border around everything that's all containing it all together. And two is this line that's separating out my first row and my second row. Well, that line in the center we actually have already seen it. It is called an HR for header row. And so if I throw that, I think it's header row. If I throw that HR in there, it will put in that line between the two rows that I want. All right, that's nicely styled. Now let's go target my outer container, right? So what I'm going to do is container is already here. But we want to be careful whenever we're modifying classes, because I could throw container down here and go ahead and style it and everything would work fine. But what happens if I apply this CSS to another Bootstrap page? Now I'm targeting a container that I may not want to be targeting, right? It's possible to use the same CSS file across several different pages. That's even more important when I target something like a row, because I may make a row and go, oh, this is the only row that I'm using on the page, and then go and use a row somewhere else on the page and accidentally have that styling apply. So in general, it's a better idea to make up your own classes or your own IDs instead of targeting the ones that Bootstrap have already pre-named for you. So I'm going to add an ID here, and I can even call it the same thing. I can call it container, and then change this to a hashtag down here. Again, it would work if we use that Bootstrap class, but it's just best practice to not mix your code on top of someone else's code. So I'm going to use my ID container here, and I'm going to start with a border. And I'm going to say my border is 1px solid gray. 1px is the thickness of it. The solid is the line style. I could do dashed, I can do dotted, I can do a couple different things there. And then gray, because black is just a very big visual statement. When you get into design, you learn that sometimes using pure black is a bad idea. Using some variant of it like gray or a darker gray is a good idea. And I'm like, okay, that's looking good. It's looking better. Couple things are missing. If I look at my original design, I've got a nice rounded corner on that. We can round things out with a property called radius. So we're going to say border dash radius is, let's try it at 20 pixels. So I'll save that. And now I've got a nice curve going on there. Obviously, the lower the number, the less of a curve that you get there. Totally personal preference. All right, it's looking good. Got two spacing problems. One, this is all the way up at the top, right? And when we think about websites, when we think about using apps on our phone, we normally don't have things all the way to the top. We have a little bit of white space. We have a gap between those two. That's really easy to achieve because I want to take the whole thing and move it down off the top of the page. I want it to apply outside of the border. Outside of the border means margin. So I'm going to add a margin top here of, let's say, 15 pixels. Okay, that's looking good. And then the final problem that I have here is all of this stuff is right against the edge. But I want that to apply not only to the top part, but also to the right, the left, and the bottom. So when we apply something when we say something like margin 15, that margin 15 is going to get applied all the way around. That's what I want for the padding. I didn't want that for the margin. I didn't want the margin to apply to the left, right, or bottom. So I specified here margin top. I am also going to add some padding, and let's add 20 pixels of padding. And what did that do? That added space between the border and the content. So we see our box model working there, right? We see our padding, we see our border, and we see our margin all working together to give us space around elements. And the reason why we have all three of those properties is because white space is really important, right? The space between content is important. So I'm going to shrink this down. You can really see our content starting to shape up. Down here, I, again, added my ID container so it applied everything properly. And then I added in 4 separate CSS properties to style my container.
Hi. I missed what you did to get that long line in between the
Yep.
two rows.
That's a really quick one. I just added this little HR self-closing tag between the closing div of the first row and before the opening div of the second row.
Oh, thank you. See
Yeah.
it.
I think I did mine wrong.
Okay, you want to share your screen? So you went, everything's looking pretty good. You went for a pretty strong border radius. So if you go back to your CSS and change your border radius from 20% to 20 pixels and save, that should just change the roundedness of the border. But other than that, everything looks pretty good.
Oh yeah, it worked. Thanks, Max.
No problem. I mean, if you like that look, go for it, and nothing against you. Percentages are really helpful if you want to make like a perfect circle. 100, you do 100% border radius, and that makes all four corners rounded, perfectly. So you can definitely use percent. It's not a wrong thing to do. Just depends on what kind of style you're going for. All right, how are we feeling? Anyone have questions?
I do have one, and that's only because my temperature and my details seem to be aligning bottom.
Okay, share your screen. Let's take a look.
Yep.
Okay. Don't know how you did that, but let's look at your code. I'm going to request remote. Okay, so we've got your row, opening and closing div, details, opening and closing div, opening and closing. Okay, our HR is inside of our first row. We don't want our HR inside that row. We want it between the rows.
Thank you.
And you're good to go.
I had a question real quick. I was filling up my water when you were explaining the difference between using text end and text align right.
Does text align right actually work?
I used it.
Okay.
I had it in there before you went over it, and it did push it to the same position. I don't know I didn't try scaling everything differently though.
Yeah, so it will probably not make a difference in this scenario. If you do, let me confirm before I open my mouth. I gotta Google that one. So I think text align, are you saying you did text align right in the CSS or that you used
Yes.
it? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you used the Bootstrap class that was like, oh, I didn't know that existed anymore.
No.
They
I
do
put
the
it in
same exact
CSS.
thing. The same exact thing. In fact, if you look in, if I go into the inspect element, and go ahead and pick that item, you can see that the class text end, all that it's doing is setting text align to right. And if you're like, what's this utilities thing? If you click on that and scroll all the way up to the top of that, you can see this is actually coming from Bootstrap itself. And so it's doing the same exact thing. It's just the class that's built into Bootstrap so that you don't have to write out the CSS yourself.
I see. And then the exclamation mark important, that just means it overrides.
Yeah.
But since we have it in there that our CSS it's kind of relevant.
Correct. Yeah. The import is more important when you've got CSS that is cascading over each other, and the important basically says don't cascade over this, make this the most important rule, so that nothing overrides it. But it's a very powerful tool that you want to like yield only when you get to more advanced CSS, basically. And I did remember to start the recording. If you go into Zoom, it should say in the top left recording with a flashing light. And that's how you know it restarted. But thank you for checking. Okay, let's finish out our days down here at the bottom. And then believe it or not, I think I'm actually going to give you guys time to work on your homework assignment in case you have any questions. Get a jump start on that. So to finish out our days here, we have our day name, our icon to display, and then the temperature underneath it. So this is a situation where if we get one of them looking the way we want it to, it's very easy to replicate it all the way through. So this is one of those things where it's going to take a lot of lines of code, but if we can get it right in the first place, we can very easily get it showing up right everywhere. So I'm going to work in my first column. I'm going to take out that day one, and I'm going to say, all right, tomorrow's is Thursday. I'm going to throw my emoji into place here. So let's say tomorrow it is going to snow, and the high temperature is going to be 28. And I'm going to command space again and grab my degrees. I save that, and everything throws it all up onto one line. And like, you pain in my butt. I am going to put my icon into a div. And I'm going to put it into a div because one, I know I want my emoji to show up on its own line, but two, I need the ability to style that. I need the ability to make that emoji bigger. So I'm going to throw a class on that of, let's say, forecast icon. And I want to call that something that isn't going to clash because I also have a weather icon up here. So I want to be careful. I want to call that forecast icon. Why am I making it a class instead of an ID? Because I'm going to reuse that class for every single day. So I'm going to go down to the bottom. I'm going to target my forecast icon, and I will make it a font size of, let's say, 28 pixels. Looks kind of okay. Let's compare that to our design. Maybe a little bit bigger on that. Let's go up to 36, maybe. All right, that looks pretty good. The last problem that I have is it's all aligned to the left. And if I look at my design, I see that it's nice and centered. So we can go to our column and say, hey, just like we can text left or text start or text end, we can also text center. Now, what's the difference between making our own class and adding text line center? Absolutely nothing. This is just something that Bootstrap does out of the box, so we don't have to write more CSS. So I come over here and I've got everything nicely centered. So if you want the practice, you can come in here and type out all of those divs and add everything in, or you can rapid fire here, copy and paste 5 times, then go through your days of the week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, change the temperatures a little bit, 58, 36, 92, change our icons to snow, rain, clouds, and thunderstorms. The only weather that we get in upstate New York. And just like that, we have our website complete. So give you guys a minute to practice on that. Hopefully you got a taste of make it once and replicate it out, right? And we're just repeating concepts here, right? So text center instead of text right. And the notion of our columns all being in the row. We have 5 different columns. We didn't specify a number on them, so they are evenly spaced. And they're all going back into that one row. And all it takes is for me to miss a letter in this and now look at what happened to my design. All because I took one L out, it now is like, whoa, you threw a div in the middle of columns and in a row, and I have no idea what that one div is doing in the middle of it, so I'm going to do this. It is that simple, and all I need to do is put my L back in there, and bam, my design goes back to the way that I want it to. So hopefully this is showing you the importance that every single letter in our code matters. Sometimes it's just a little typo and it just shows our content wrong. Other times it can break the entire layout of your website. And I want you guys to keep that in mind as you're working on your homework assignment, as you're working on your capstones, as you're working on any project in the future here. You'll be crying into your keyboard. Please don't, Macs aren't waterproof. You'll be pulling your hair out going, why is this not working the way I want it to? And all it sometimes takes is one character to fix everything. So keep that in mind when you are feeling less than determined. That's what one-on-ones are great for. I've been doing this for almost or over a decade now. I can help you debug, right? And so when you're getting really frustrated, schedule a one-on-one, send me your code in Slack, and we can go through and debug it together and get you back on track. But the main thing to remember there, other than the determination and fighting the imposter syndrome, is don't keep going. Don't say, I'm going to get to the end of the assignment and then I'll go back and fix everything. That is a recipe for disaster. So if something is not right, pause, fix it, and then move on. Don't save it all for the end. This is what your final site should look like. Looks a little bit better on smaller screens, but you will notice it is nice and mobile responsive. So you can pull things down and it will look good on a small screen. You can pull it all the way out and it will look good on a big screen. To give you a taste of where we are headed, we are making a news website next. So tomorrow we will start building out this news website. You can start to see there are already some columns in place. You can see we're going to go through that design step again to visually lay everything out. We'll do our outline and we'll dive into the code tomorrow. With all of that said, you now have all of the knowledge you need to know to complete your homework that is due on Sunday. So if you would like to get a jump start on that, I will stick around for at least the next 15 minutes in case there are any questions that pop up. Otherwise, you guys can head out if you have this working. If you have any questions on this from an engineering and understanding standpoint, now's the time to ask them. If it is not looking the way that you want it to, I can screen share with you. You can start on your homework or you can get out of here. Whatever you would like to do. Don't get used to me giving you 30 minutes back at the end of class, but tonight is an exception.
I got a question for me.
Shoot.
All right. Here I'll hide my code for a second.
Thank you.
Same question as earlier in the class. Let me just make sure I got the right screen here. That should be good. Cool. You see everything?
Yeah, that's looking
Okay.
really good.
So this is what I have. I fixed everything. I was messing with the column lengths.
Okay.
And then I adjust the margins here, so it should be fairly good. I just need to add some space in between this one. But this here,
yep,
is this I'm using buttons here just for context, and all 6 of these are in so this is in a row, and then all 6 buttons are in one column. Do I need to split that off into 6 individual? Okay.
That's the way
That's
I
what
would
I
do it.
thought.
Yeah, is if you do 6 individual columns, that should fix it. And yeah. And then other than that, you're good to go and you can submit this and this would get full credit for homework.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Good work.
Don't with the homework assignment, does the logo and the I think it was the menu, does that need to have like a small space or
No, it's fine. The spacing between the rows and the spacing of the content, like if you wanted to practice with padding, you can. But it doesn't need space in between them. All right, I'm gonna pause the recording here. Record this. What are some sources you would recommend for more practice against emulating the content on Dribble and then implementing in VS Code? So a really great resource if you're someone who learns in bite sizes better, Free Code Camp is a really, really excellent resource because they will list out their entire curriculum and you'll be like, oh, I want to practice with images. That's what I need practice with. And they'll have 10 different exercises that do everything with images and give you practice there. So I really like Free Code Camp for that. Shooting for emulating other websites is a really good idea, but I would recommend starting with smaller sections of websites. So we will have a assignment coming up. It is somewhat of a pop quiz, so you sticking around, you get an advantage of that. But next week we will say, hey, go find a website and go try to recreate a section of it in like 45 minutes. And we're not asking you to recreate all of Facebook.com here. We're saying, hey, go look at a Facebook like Messenger chat widget, right? With that little thing in the bottom, try and make a little chat widget work. Or, hey, go to Google.com and Google has a nav bar. Try and go make a little nav bar out of that, right? So looking at, so we'll do the news website next. And then after the news website, I think we do, let me just double check the news site. And then we do Netflix after that, which is kind of crazy to think that in a week, you'll have enough skills to basically recreate the Netflix homepage. So that's where we head next. But yeah, Free Code Camp is great for little exercises in bite-sized pieces. Or if you're looking at different websites, like I have Google Docs open right now. I wouldn't try to recreate all of Google Docs, but maybe saying, hey, you know what, just this section of the nav bar, right? I'm going to make a little icon show up. I'm going to make the document name show up, and then I'm going to make all of these menu items show up. You don't have to make it interactive. You don't have to make it so that when you click on it, it works. You don't have to worry about everything, but hey, can I make an icon show up across 2 different rows and then have those rows show that the different content there? So that can be a really good way to practice. At the end of the day, it's just going to be more lines of code, the more practice you can make, the better you're going to get at writing HTML. And the other thing is that you don't feel like you need to master HTML at the end of week 4, which is when this module is over, right? Because now when we get into JavaScript, our JavaScript is still going to need HTML to make this stuff interactive. And then we get into React, and React is, again, still going to use HTML to display interfaces. So you don't need to feel like you've learned everything in HTML at the end of week 4. But that is kind of where we're headed. We'll continue to get more and more practice. The other thing I will say is I think this is one of the more advanced tech groups. You guys are actually a day ahead of schedule already, and it's only week 2. Which is a really, really good sign. So if you're feeling behind, that's okay. We're moving a little bit quicker, but that means that we get more projects in and more practice. And so the fact that you guys are able to complete this entire weather app and have it already working just for the couple of you that shared your screen and the polls that you're voting in just means that we get more projects to practice on. So that is a good sign.
All right, one more question.
Shoot.
So how would I I switched them from buttons to columns because it was CSS was doing some weird stuff to it, so I just swapped it out. Setting it so that it's touching like the complete left side of the leftmost column and the right side of the rightmost column.
Yep.
In the group are touching the border of the row.
On that too. So the easiest way to do it, and again, I kind of cautioned against doing this, but if you're trying to visualize your columns directly, you can target the Bootstrap classes instead of having to add all of your own. So the easiest way of doing it, especially if it's just for like debugging purposes or visualization purposes, is to target the col and on any col say, hey, add a border of 1px solid green and save, and you can kind of see where our borders are on that lower one. But you can also see that those aren't applying up here, which is kind of annoying. That's because they are all mostly col 2s. So instead of having to write another col 2, add the border to that, CSS will actually allow you to comma separate and apply to multiple classes. So I can apply that to my col 2 and to my col 6 and save that and see exactly where those are. And then I can even get to the level of saying, hey, make my rows a border of 1px solid blue and my container a border of 1px solid red. And what you'll notice is this ends up looking a lot like this that we created in preview. Right. So that gives you an idea of kind of where the columns are, where the boundaries of the columns are, and just gives you a better idea of how that's applying.
Awesome. That helps a lot, actually.
And if you remind me tomorrow before we dive into the news site, I will show the class that so it's a good visual alignment. That was a great question. Thank you. The other thing that
Sounds
I
good.
noticed that's really bothering me is this cloud is not centered. And so we can just throw class of text center on this, and it will just make everything more balanced. That was bothering me. Sorry, all these good questions I want to capture in the recording. So unfortunately, there's not an easy answer to that. The best answer to that is to just start reading through Bootstrap. And manage to not get overwhelmed by it, right? Because there are certain things in there where you're like gutters, for example, actually solve the exact problem that we're looking for in the mockup, right? Having those gaps between the columns is called a gutter, and that's how you kind of space out columns. So it's very easy to scroll through here and be like, this is endless. I'm never going to learn all of these. But the good news is that it comes over time, right? So like this entire section of components, all you really need to know is, oh, that's what that thing is called. So next time I go to use it, as long as I know what it's called, I can go to the documentation and then become better at it, right? So when we start in the nav bar is like, that is insane, right? If you look, no one would not get overwhelmed by that. But when we scroll down a little bit, it gets a little bit easier and we go, okay, just a nav bar with just text. Okay, what if I want to put an image in it? Okay, that's a little bit more manageable, right? So in all of my years of using Bootstrap, have never put a nav bar in a page without going to the Bootstrap documentation and referring to it. But for things like the text stuff, you're like, oh, I remember text end, that throws the text at the end. That's pretty easy. So that also comes with experience. But I would say the main thing is like just going through this and just getting exposure to it for the first time means that you will at least know where to find the documentation next time. And that's enough to get the practice with it. So there's no real answer of like, here are the top 50 things you need to know about Bootstrap. Memorize these and you'll be good to go. But you'll also find that like we use the grid in every single project. And so you'll use that with combination of the documentation and the grid will just start coming to you naturally, right? I would say a good probably 2/3 of the things in this sidebar I've never used in Bootstrap. I'm sure they're functional. I'm sure they're great, but like I personally never needed to use them building a website or a web app. So a lot of that is just project based, and we'll get to the end of it, and you can go, well, if I can build all of Netflix with the 10% of Bootstrap that I know, do I really need to know the other 90%? So unfortunately, the answer is just more experience there. But you will see me going back to the documentation. And that isn't just to show you where to find the information. It's because I need that information as well, and I don't have it memorized. So yes, you're right. It's a combination of experience, but also documentation. Oh, and there are great YouTube videos as well. So you can go on YouTube and just search for Bootstrap tutorial, and you find a guy that you like. It's really funny. I showed that Bootstrap grid video, and the guy keeps on saying, "Oh, well, this is available to you," and that drove a student in the first cohort nuts. Of like, available, it's available. There's no W in that word. It's available. So some YouTubers drive you absolutely insane. Some YouTubers are great. And Medium articles or blog posts can be another great way to learn. And then there are also textbooks, right? There's nothing wrong with like going out and getting a Bootstrap textbook, and that may be a better way to learn for you as well. So whatever learning resource has worked for you in the past, like ride that out. There is a list of like recommended textbooks that I will dig up and share with the class tomorrow. So if that's a resource that works for you, I will definitely share those. But yeah, whatever resource works for you, just ride that out.
Thank you so much.
Of course.